Hey, good afternoon, everybody. For those who don't know me, I'm Barb Prather. I work at the Northeast Iowa Food Bank, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight to moderate the legislative forum. And we're very honored to have three of our legislators with us, Representative Jerome Amos, Representative Bob Kresick, and Senator Eric Giddens. And we also have three speakers tonight talking about various topics, somewhat focused on the budget. But the first I'd like to introduce is Susan Entrican, who is the Community Outreach Coordinator at the Northeast Iowa Food Bank. I think I got her title right.
Good afternoon. Means a lot to my heart. And 6 counties. Excuse me. In this area, during our last fiscal year, we served 6.63 million meals to those in need. This year, the meal gap stands at a little over 5 million. But we have a lot that we are working at the food bank. One thing that we are seeing is that given all the government funding that came into play during the pandemic to step in to help those in need, like the child tax credit, stimulus checks, free and reduced lunch for everyone, those stepped in and did what they were supposed to do, and they did great. They helped people. Now those programs have been eliminated or stopped. SNAP, as of April 1st of last year, was rolled back pre-pandemic levels. So I've been asked that question a lot. Well, what does that mean? Well, I always use the example of an elderly couple that is maybe during the pandemic getting $195 in SNAP. Well, after it gets rolled back, that was about to $95 or even as low as $20 that they were receiving from SNAP. So we have seen an increase in the last 6 to 7 months. Over our summer months, we saw a 10% increase on top of a 10% increase each month at the Cedar Valley Food Pantry that serves Blackhawk County. So what that means is that people who were using those government programs to be able to subsidize, when those went away, plus the huge inflation as we all found, gas prices, grocery products, all of that is a little bit higher. People are having trouble to stretch their dollars. People are struggling to be able to get to the end of the year. So we are seeing more and more people in need. So according to our stats, if you look at the first quarter of 2020 to what we had now, we saw a 60% increase in the number of people we are serving just in the Cedar Valley. So the need is up. So what does that mean? That leads us to House Bill 3, which has been on the floor. It was in subcommittee and has now gone to the full committee. And what that bill is doing is it will put on a huge asset limit. Now, I've been asked this question a couple of times and I've been talking to it. What does that asset limit mean? Let's think about it in the sense of a family of 4. Mom and dad are working. They are working, but we are kind of in that working poor. They work, they might be able to get to the end of the month, but it's tight. Now they had an accident. Little Johnny fell on the equipment at school, broke his arm. Not only do they have an ER bill, they have x-ray bills. They maybe don't have the best insurance. And so here they are, and now they are going to need assistance to get through to make ends meet. So now they would try to apply for SNAP benefits, but here's a caveat. They own a minivan. Anything that is over $2,500 of assets would eliminate them and they would not be able to qualify for SNAP. If you think about an elderly couple or an elderly woman who's lived in the same house for 50 years, it's well paid off But now she's living on a fixed income and is having to choose between bills and food. For her to be able to qualify for SNAP, she doesn't qualify because she owns her home. So those are the things that we're looking at. So we, as Northeast Iowa Food Bank, really discourage this bill. There's no fiscal note on it, so we really do not know how much it's actually going to cost the state of Iowa. Not to mention when they start to put limits and asset limits and make it harder for people to get SNAP, it will also then start taxing all of the food banks, pantries, and food resources in Iowa. So not only does the Northeast Iowa Food Bank feel it, but all. Plus you also lose those dollars that go in towards our grocery stores to help our local economy. SNAP benefits do that. So if you think of that, that's why we discourage it. And before I open up to questions or however we want to do, I want to tell a story that is very, very close to my heart. So as a staff member of the Northeast Iowa Food Bank, I get the honor of going out and sometimes helping out in the Cedar Valley Food Pantry. One day I got to be outside and just kind of help the line on our monthly or our weekly distribution that we do on Fridays. And on that weekly distribution, it is our produce and perishables. So people come, they can come every week and get those staple items and more of that fresh food, fresh vegetables and fruits that are good for that. I was kind of helping, making sure everybody was doing well in the line, and I got to talking to a mom. She is a mother of 3 who was now working at BTM and had a really good paying job. However, inflation, the cost of daycare, the cost of gas has really started to take a toll on it. So being able to come to the Cedar Valley Food Pantry was helping to fill that void and being able to help her to be able to get along. We are out here doing this, trying to help those, not because they're looking just for a hand, but they're looking for a hand up. And they're trying to do the best they can. And SNAP benefits are one way that we can help.
We'll do the speakers first and then we'll open it up to the legislators. So our next speaker is our own Board of Supervisor member, Chris Schwartz.
I'm going to talk a little bit about what the budget concerns are from the county perspective when it deals with our interactions with the state. Present company excluded, because I know that you're not a majority party, so do not take offense to my remarks because they might be kind of hard, but it's geared towards your colleagues. And this is the 7th budget that I have the privilege of working on in the county. And if I had to summarize what the relationship is between the state and the county, the state is kind of like that racist drunk uncle that you have to invite to your family gathering. But you are experienced, you have no idea what they're going to do next. You don't know what's going to come out of their mouth. And it's usually often erratic and maybe violent too. And so, and I really do mean racist part of the state right now. But, and so some examples of that, the state is constantly concerned about the way that local budgets grow. And so they're constantly looking at ways to limit the amount of growth. So say that you have a lot of new homes built here, your property valuations have gone up, then your budget's going to grow because your community grows because you've got more people that you're trying to provide services for. Some of the proposals that we have seen come out of the state legislation this year would not just cap the amount of tax rates can go up annually, but also would really punish communities that did have a lot of growth and put caps on what your overall tax estimates can grow by, and really tie even small things to 1 or 2% growth a lot of the most. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of things that happen when our budgets do grow here in Black. So over the last couple of years, because of the growth, we've been able to do things like add a second social worker to the Black County Jail. What does that person do? Well, they work with people as they get out of jail to try and eliminate the cycle of recidivism, ultimately saving money down the road. But that's the kind of investment we can't make in if we're not allowed to grow. Another area that we got into with additional epidemiologists and disease surveillance specialists. Blackhawk County has usually right there at the top of highest rates of STD in the state of Iowa. People like to get it out. That's great. But it takes resources to be able to make sure that we're not being known as the venereal disease capital of Iowa. And that's serious business. When these go untreated, they can lead to serious consequences for people. So that's the area that we were able to do and able to invest in because we were able to grow. Just last year, we added a roadside biologist. So what's that person going to do? Well, Blackhawk County, think about all the right of ways and all our county roads. That encompasses over 6,000 acres of land. This roadside biologist is going to be able to coordinate more of our perennial and native plantings in all these corridors. It's going to integrate both pollinator corridors and also as one of the most critical parts of water quality. It provides an additional buffer to filter water that's running out of our road system. That's something we could not have invested in if we were not allowed to grow our budgets. In this current budget that we're trying to invest in, I notice I'm talking about positions here. I'm not talking about the buildings we're able to build or one-time expenses, because if we can't grow your budget, you can't add positions. Because these are ongoing expenses, so that we need to be able to invest in. But these are the kind of stuff that the state is trying to do in play on. So this year, what are we trying to do with the growth? We are trying to add an additional dental hygienist. Desperately needed in this community. Dental care is really lacking. It's hard for everybody. It's hard for you to get in to see a dentist if you have good coverage. Let alone people that are on the Medicaid system. So that's a critical position that we be able to add and fund here. And it will be partially funded through Medicaid reimbursements. But if you all know anything about Medicaid reimbursements, that's not enough to pay for any programs. Another place we're trying to invest and grow this year is to actually have a communication specialist for Blackhawk County. So all the great things that I just told you about right now that happened in the last 5 years wouldn't have been great news to you. So you would know about the services that we have and be able to access those. But these are things that we can't do if we're not allowed to grow. So where are we at this year with the budget? Well, Blackhawk County usually gets started on the budget process in the month of November. So we're 3.5 months into it, but because the state, to their own mistake, miscalculations with budget rollback, which was a compromise made years ago that essentially shifts the burden of property taxes more away from commercial property taxes to property tax owners or to residential property taxes. But because the state made an error in their calculation, we're having to completely start over with all our populations. So instead of being able to stand here today and tell you that our overall taxations are growing by 3.3%, which is what it was going to be on the calculations that we've been working on there for 3.5 months. I can't tell you what it was, because the state doesn't have their act together. And now they're going to have a Senate bill. Now they're going to delay us. And so what's the launch? What's the parachute that the state gives us? Well, they give us 1 more month to certify the budget, but that doesn't do us any good because the supervisors are in session year round. That just delays on the other work on as we doing the budget is just one part of our work we're trying to get through. We're trying to make decisions on how to invest all the various feedback. But because here we stand 3.5 months into our budget process. And we can't tell people what our taxable evaluations are. We can't move forward. And so it seems to me that the state is far more concerned with beating up on queer and trans kids right now and using that to hide the other shenanigans that they're doing. That whether it's undermining the SNAP program or whether it's handing out more and more corporate tax giveaways, they're instead beating up on some of the most common people in our state. And I tell you, not just as a gay man, I tell you as a gay man lost my husband to suicide. What they're doing is dangerous and it's disgusting. I think about if my husband had felt safe at school when he was a child, He had done safety and security to be who he was, to express who he was, to explore who he was. He'd be here today. It's like Logan and many other children, he didn't have that security at all. So school is where it's supposed to be. But in this stage, they're running a war on these kids. And you know what? They can go to hell for it.
Thank you, Chris. And our last speaker is Barb Grant from Operation Threshold.
Good afternoon. I am with Operation Threshold. We are the community action agency that serves Blackhawk, Buchanan, and Grundy counties. Annually, we serve about 11% of the total population of those three counties, close to 20,000 people a year. We provide services to help people meet their basic needs and also support their endeavors to become self-sufficient. I'm here today to talk about the state reorganization. So first of all, you need to know that it's 1,569 or 1,570 pages long, just depending on whether you look at the Senate version or the House version. So to boil it down into 5 minutes is impossible. But I will focus on just a couple of the aspects of the bill that I have some significant concerns about. One is the creation of the Department of Health and Human Services that relates to that. So that's the merger of the Iowa Department of Public Health and the Department of Human Services that the legislature authorized last year. Arguably, the planning for that probably started back when the DHS director, Kelly Garcia, was named also interim director of the Iowa Department of Public Health. That was in 2020. And certainly the legislature authorized that merger, and there's been intensive planning going on since then. All kinds of meetings, lots of stakeholders involved, just very extensive planning. And last summer, they announced that the Department of Aging was going to merge into HHS, as was the Early Childhood Iowa program. So they also have been involved in the planning. Then in January, the day after the state of the state, they announced that the Department of Human Rights was going to merge in, and they were told that, and we get a lot of our funding through there, they were told that the structure had to be determined by March and that this would be effective July 1st along with everything else. And I'm very concerned about the need to make sure that it's all well planned. You can plan for the merger of IDPH and DHS, but you actually need to have it happen and have it go forward, I think, before you destabilize everything else. An example of well, first of all, I should say, so this newly created department, merged department, HHS, will serve all of Iowans who are most at risk, whether it be seniors, children in the child welfare system, providing mental health services, low-income individuals and families. We have to get this right. This is too critical. We absolutely have to get this right. I have an anecdotal, very small example of an issue that's already occurred. The Iowa Rent Rebate Program is very small. It's been run by a different department, and it was merged into HHS. Director Garcia was touting its success, how successfully they rolled it out. Well, they did roll it out earlier this year in January than they ever have before. But they made it an online system. In order to apply, people who are eligible have to meet income guidelines and be elderly or disabled. It was an online application system. If people needed help applying, because many of the target population can't or don't have the access to do it online, they listed about 10 agencies across the state that could help with this application process. Well, one of them had been closed one of the agencies had been closed for 2 years. They hadn't talked to these agencies. So these agencies were getting thousands and thousands of calls, not having any idea where this was coming from and why. Subsequently, because the agencies pushed back, they were able to get a paper application for people to fill out, so that's good. But Director Garcia was touting this as a success, that it was very smooth and it was great. And I can see why somebody at her level wouldn't know about the issues with this, but the reality is it wasn't smooth. And this is a minor thing. When you look at DHS and IDPH and the programs they serve, are the programs they operate, you know, I mean, it's Medicaid, it's child welfare, you know, it's health programs, people's lives depend upon this being successful. One of the other concerns that I have is that in the bill, it says that it's going to eliminate or purports to eliminate all of the substructure in HHS. So all of the divisions, all of the bureaus, all of the administrators, that's all gone. That's all removed that historically has been in place, which really then takes some of the decision making and the input away from the legislators. You know, the legislature then doesn't have that authority to, you know, to set those things. It all rests in the director's hands. It also proposes to establish a committee to review all of the boards and commissions that have been established in Iowa code. So boards and commissions that the legislature has established. And, you know, usually they establish those to oversee a smaller unit or, you know, or a set of programs or services or work on a need or look at policies, bring together policy experts or subject matter experts, citizens, legislators to focus more narrowly. Well, the governor had mentioned in her State of the State that they have over 100 boards and commissions and councils and things, and that they want to look at the efficiency and the efficacy or efficiencies and effectiveness of the boards and the councils, which is fine. But I'm concerned that this is happening. The report is supposed to be due the end of September, which wouldn't give the committee that's going to work on it any time to look at the implications of the state reorganization, assuming it goes through July, you know, and goes into effect July 1st. The implications of that won't be known yet. So they're taking away that structure, and again, then removing some of the opportunities for input and oversight by legislators, by citizens, and by experts, which concerns me. This is all. It should be noted this is all occurring now in the time frame of an executive order that the governor issued that prohibits state agencies from drafting new rules. So it's a 4-year prohibition or moratorium. And I'm concerned that yet again, that's another set of, or another area where input and oversight is going to be removed, at least until they've conducted their full review of the administrative code and determined what should be in place going forward. So we're going to reorganize, we're going to create a giant department, and there are other things being reorganized at the state level as well, but I was going to focus on HHS. But they're going to create this giant department, and then there won't be administrative code to even back up some of the protections and things that you would expect to be there. And then there's a couple other things that are being proposed that are of concern. One is the Office of Consumer Advocate. So this is the person that's known as the people's lawyer, who argues to the Iowa Utilities Board, representing the people of Iowa against what the utility companies propose. You know, applications that they make to the utility company. And so all of the citizens of Iowa are represented by the Office of Consumer Advocate. It's critical that they're viewed as an independent body or independent speaker on behalf of the citizens. And that's how they have their credibility. Well, this proposes moving the Office of Consumer Advocate into the Iowa Utilities Board, which just totally undermines its credibility. And then perhaps most concerning is the Iowa Child Advocacy Board, which operates the Iowa Foster Care Review Board and the court-appointed special advocate for the CASA program, which advocates for individual children in the foster care program. They're proposing to put that into HHS, which then makes essentially, I mean, as the chair of that board wrote, it basically has the fox guarding the hen house. These bodies are supposed to be a check. It's supposed to be oversight. It's supposed to to help those children in the child welfare system. And ultimately, you know, it's supposed to make everything, work kind of with HHS via, a check and a balance with the HHS that ultimately results in the best for the kids who were in the child welfare system and most at risk. And so that's a very scary proposal. And just with all the change, I mean, if I had my druthers, we would not create a super agency like HHS. But I think that's going to happen. But I would certainly advocate for slowing down this train. I mean, IDPH and DHS have been working at this marker for quite a while. And, we have one contract that, the staff just met their new supervisor this week. I mean, and this has been, in place or in process for a long time. They need to be able to get a new system settled and established before you keep adding. I worked once for an agency whose director was all about change seemingly all the time. When you worked there, that's what you felt. And I had one staffer say to me one day, every Monday I can't figure out who I even go to even to ask for pay. This is crazy. Well, I would argue that the services that are being proposed to be restructured are much more important than paper, and we need to really protect those most vulnerable in the state. So, oh, and the bill is supposed to save $214 million over 4 years. So, that's how it related to the budget.
Okay. Well, you've heard 3 stories. There's a lot more out there like it. What we'll do now is you will each have 8 minutes to give a statement, respond, or whatever you would like to share. Whose birthday is closest to today?
Mine's December 31st. November. We're going backwards or forwards?
Depends on what Representative Amos says.
Mine is August.
I guess you're it if we go backwards then.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. Looks like the sun's still shining, the skies are blue, and we don't have a foot of snow on the ground, which I'm very thankful for. So it was good to hear some comments about SNAP proposal. I know that when they first came out, they had significant restrictions on SNAP. In other words, you couldn't even buy meat, fresh meat. You had to buy canned meat. And then it sounds like they backed away from that somewhat. But my understanding on that is the federal government would have to approve their changes because the dollars that flow into that are federal money. And so I don't know, but I think it creates a kind of a situation. There's 300,000 Iowans today that are food insecure. And one number that just really sticks out with me is there's 100,000 children, or 1/3 of that number, that are also food insecure. And it's really sad. And I know the food bank and others, they're overwhelmed right now with just providing food and services to people in need. And it just goes on to say more about how the Republican Party in Des Moines is attacking people in need in our state. And I've seen that. The county budgets, Chris, I'd have to agree with your comments. I also know that cities have shared some of the concerns that you have. But right now, we have not seen the budget numbers come out. They haven't been released, and I'm sure we may see them probably in sometime in April or March, I would think. Yeah, that we'll see their numbers, but we haven't seen the budget numbers yet. But I do know that some of their approaches is to restrict county governments and restrict city governments with the ability of providing critical services to our community. And I know our county does some things too, and our cities do. If you look just at public safety, the actual cost of that, it's pretty significant to counties and cities. Like we have a corrections facility here in Blackhawk, which is pretty big. And the restructuring state committees, I've heard quite a bit on that. One of the downsides to that, along with others, is how the lack of input from the people that utilize these groups to give influence. And I'll give you two areas: the school for the blind, and then the hearing impaired. They have some really major concerns that, and that's kind of a unique group. My father was blind, and I grew up in that environment. That they have to have certain specific resources to make sure that our people that are blind or deaf can get access to a quality of life. And I just don't really get a sense, and I got to share too, the budgeting process over the years. What I've seen, especially with the majority party in power, is they don't necessarily take our input. Now we get to, I don't even think the Senate, we used to have a mutual budget committee. Now it's completely Senate and House. So it's been a change, and I know for a fact that there's a room in there with the door closed, and they're in there deciding what the budgets will be. So we'll have to see kind of what that all turns out to be. But I appreciate all the conversation. So thank you.
Next, me
You can go.
going back.
Yeah, we'll go backwards with birthday. Sorry, Jerome. You can start first next time.
Going for that. Thank you all. It's great to be with you back here at home. It's nice to be in a room with experts too, that really understand the critical and important work that you do. And I really appreciate you sharing all your thoughts on the things that are flowing through the Capitol right now. If folks.
I
think it is actually. Well, closer.
There, that's better.
Got hold it. How's that? So I think I was about to say that I wish folks in Des Moines would listen to our folks here in Blackhawk County. If we did more of that, then I think the state would be better off. So just on these points that you guys brought up, just a few sort of additional comments and reactions about first the SNAP thing. Thank you, Susan, for sharing all that you did about SNAP. I guess I would say it's this asset test thing I view as mean-spirited and really cruel. There's no point to it other than to try to villainize folks who are the most vulnerable in our communities. Bart's been telling us for how much more food insecure folks are here in our community, how the pandemic really just made that explode. And instead of doing things public policy wise, it's in the state government level to try to figure out how to help more people put food on the table. My colleagues across the aisle are doing the opposite, trying to figure out how to stop people from getting the assistance that they need. So I just can't figure it out myself. Back on to Chris, thank you for your comments on the budget. I wanted to just add a little bit to that conversation about the rollback. We know that the miscalculation was caught at the end of October by the Legislative Services Agency. They informed the Department of Revenue and others that there was a mistake and that local governments needed to know about this thing before they began their budgeting process for this coming year, and nothing was shared. So local governments all across the state continued their budgeting processes, cities and counties and so forth. Most cities do their annual budgeting and goal setting in November, so it would have been just in time to catch that process. You guys started around that time, maybe just a little slightly after that with the county, but I can't understand why that information wasn't shared with local governments and a solution worked out when it was discovered. So then fast forward to the legislative session, and the legislature's in a position to have to act on this thing one way or the other. If it was allowed to stand as it was, property taxpayers essentially would be on the hook for extra money that, according to state code, going back, they shouldn't have had to pay. That was the way the mistake worked out. If it were to be changed by the legislature, then local governments are on the hook for trying to provide services that they had budgeted for already based on incorrect numbers. So we were in a bad situation here, Senate Democrats, my colleagues and I, we offered an amendment. I'm not sure what was done in the House, but we offered an amendment for the state to backfill local governments for the miscalculation. Basically, it shouldn't be borne on the backs of the local governments and the services they're trying to provide. And we felt like it also shouldn't have to be paid by property taxpayers, who through no fault of their own would have had to pay higher taxes than what they should have had to pay. That amendment was not taken, just as none of the amendments that my side ever proposes are ever taken. But and then the bill went on to pass, which created the situation we're in now, where all the local governments across the state, their budgets that were developed are now incorrect. They're overinflated. They are going to have less income than or revenue than they thought they would have. Trying to figure out what to do to fix that, and have only been given an extra month to try to figure that out. So just wanted to give you a little bit more of the backstory on the process that they should have, the state should have informed these governments back in right at the beginning of November. And I'm sorry that it all came down that way. Let's see. And then on state government reorg and all the implications for that. Thank you, Barb, for sharing your insight on HHS. This is a massive bill, as Barb said. It's over 1,500 pages long. I'll just say out of the gate that our state government, our legislature and our staff are not equipped to handle 1,500 page bills. That's congressional scale legislation, right? We don't deal with 1,500 page bills. It's too much. As Barb correctly stated, this should have been a more diligent and thought out and longer process. If we are going to try to find efficiencies in state government, it should have more public participation. It should have input from the people that are being affected and so forth. And none of that happened. So another little piece of backstory on this thing is that the governor's office hired a consultant to write the plan for the state government reorganization. The contract was signed just this past October. Out-of-state consultant was, sorry, not October, August, this past August. An out-of-state consultant brought in with a $1 million contract, and we've obtained the contract that the consultant was paid to write. Report was produced that was the basis for the 1,500 page bill that was then drafted to try to make all this happen, right? And I do have to say, work of combining the Department of Human Services and Department of Public Health has actually been a longer and a little bit more transparent process than a lot of the other stuff in this bill. So to give them a little bit of credit for that, that predates this consultant's work. But still, it's just too much, too fast, the whole thing. So $1 million contract in August, the bill drops, a few weeks into the legislative session. And there was no public input into the process of developing that report that the consultant produced. An inconsistency in what the governor said to us in her condition of the state speech, the first week of the session. I thought I remembered hearing this. I asked colleagues and we went back and looked it up, that she said nobody would lose their jobs over this thing. And so we're trying to figure out, how are you going to save all that money if nobody loses their job? This is supposed to be a big efficiency thing. Well, once we got the report that the consultant produced and started looking through that, there's plenty of what they refer to as personnel efficiencies found throughout the report, which are layoffs. That's essentially what that is. The vast majority of the savings that are being purported through this process are going to be through layoffs. They might not happen immediately, but they will eventually happen. So big concerns about this thing. Barb did a really good job of talking about several of the details associated with the HHS part of it, which actually is the biggest part of the reorganization, pertains to HHS, but there are plenty others. Bob talked about the blind and deaf. The community action agencies work with CASAs, sorry, not community action, but the what's their child advocacy board. Thank you. And how that is very problematic for them to be folded into HHS, which is a direct conflict of interest kind of thing. So many other concerns similar to those sorts of things. So I think I've probably taken more than 8 minutes, but I just wanted to respond to each of those things. There's a lot of other not so great stuff flowing through the Capitol as well right now that maybe we can respond to if you have questions. Thank you all.
Good evening, everyone. I'm the freshman here. Just so you all know, well, you do all know that I am the freshman here, and just kind of wanted to go over some of the committees that I've been assigned to. I've been assigned to 5 different committees: labor, workforce, public safety, local government, appropriations, and the economic development budget. Serve on a couple of them with Representative Kressig, and I think you are the ranking member on one of those, public safety. And then Timmy Brown Powers is appropriations. She's the ranking member on that. For me, listening to a lot of these things that are going on is just working with the Republicans, working on the other side of the aisle. All of these things that these guys are talking about, they are just, it's devastating. It's just, I don't understand it. I truly do not understand what is going on here and why their thought process is the way it is. And then there are other things that when they come before the entire body, we vote unanimously on. But the things that I see that are happening to the least of these, the people who really need the help. Like I said, it makes no sense at all to me, the SNAP benefit thing. And how, when they started off, like Representative Kressig said, it was meats, it was everything. But then once they started hearing from the businesses and how they were going to lose money behind not being able to sell meat, not being able to do these things, their tone changed. So they did some amendments, they did some things to make it different, but it still is not what it should be to help folks. When we talk about the budget, the actual county budget, the things that they are doing to the counties, that rollback, sitting on the city council for 7 years. That's always been a worry, that rollback back to where they are going to take and try and equalize the commercial and the residential. Well, it ends up being to where the residential ends up paying more. But what the state did is they subsidized that so that it wasn't having so much of an impact on the cities. Well, that's changing. It is changing to the point now to where We just had a vote on some legislation to where they're trying to come across like, oh, well, we're including the multi-residential, we're including a lot of things in there that wasn't in there before. But what they failed to tell you is it's still not enough. It still means that the cities are going to have to raise taxes or lay off or do whatever in order to make ends meet. There was an amendment like they did in the Senate to where Representative Jacoby did the amendment to where we were going to try and take $126 million out of the state reserve fund to put into the system so that we would be able to make sure that the cities had what they needed to operate until things came around. That was shot down. And I listened to the gentleman who was running the bill. And you know what he said? His thought process was, well, the cities have reserves, let them pay for it. Yeah, you know, so it's like, what? If you as a state have millions of dollars just sitting there, you're putting it back on the cities to do when, I mean, like here in Waterloo, a lot of the dollars that we use are based off of that rollback. So when the time comes, we don't have $24 million like the city of Ankeny does in the system where they can do it. So I voted no on that bill. I did because I know what it's going to do. You know, the city of Waterloo, it's somewhere around 75% of the budget for the city of Waterloo is police and fire. So if you have to turn around and make cuts, where are those cuts going to come at? And I, for one, will not impact public safety. But unfortunately, we are in a position now to where we can't do anything but sit and listen and be upset about what's going on. And believe me, I know Representative Cressy, I've seen him, he's upset and he lets them know. You know, so it's just a matter for me, those types of things are the things that are going on. You talk about that reorganization. They're taking 37 administrative positions and knocking them down to 16. And in the Appropriations Committee, when they talked about that, I asked that question. I said, does that mean jobs are going to be cut? They said no. Well, how can you reorganize and do those things and not make cuts in jobs? Just that makes absolutely no sense in any way, shape, or form. But we are down there. We are using our voices. We are trying to get folks to understand it's not a good direction as far as what you're doing, because like I say, once again, you're impacting the least, the people that need it the most. Why? I don't know. I will continue to work and use this voice that the good Lord gave me to try and make a difference. And maybe someday people will listen, either that, or maybe someday there will be someone else in power who can make a difference.
Yeah, good job. Yeah, good job. For a freshman.
And we did save the best for last. So thank you very much. I forgot to do something and Sherry is going to hate me if I don't remind people, there's cupcakes over there because this is the 103rd birthday today for the League of Women Voters. So if you leave, take a cupcake, or if you're hungry now, take a cupcake. We're now at the time to hear questions from the public. We're already ahead of schedule, which is a good thing. But if anybody has a question, please come up to the microphone, state your name, who you're with, you're representing yourself, state that, and share your question. And we'll give people 3 minutes. 3 minutes per question, and then we'll ask after each question, you will have an opportunity to respond. So who will be first?
Al Turner, just a voter, concerned citizen. How? Be more effective. I mean, other than getting out and vote, other than inviting our legislators and those other too, how can we be most effective? What else can we do?
So my sense is right now, the state of Iowa has gone red. It's a red state. We're seeing people voting for individuals that are elected in positions that I sometimes wonder, how did they get elected? You know, I really do. And they're really focused on issues. You know, if you hear somebody talking to you and they're elected and they say, here's what I want to do. You know, I think a question would be to that individual, say, well, what can we do together? And I think that's kind of the divide. I would think one thing, if you have friends that, you know, have gone the conservative route, it's difficult to change their mind. But if you find an issue like a loved one dealing with healthcare, mental health, any of those things that occur, but I see parts of the state have just completely gone, you know, they're voting Republican, and that's basically their approach, you know. So I think it's going to be difficult. I know there are candidates that are in spots that have difficult races. Particularly money is a big influence in those races. And, you know, I've known some friends that have been down there for a while and they're not there anymore. And our majority has shrunk. We're at 34, you know, and they're at a significant number, and the Senate is at 16. So that gives them significant powers. And then, of course, the governor, her opposed. So I'm hopeful that one of the things that I've done over the years as a candidate, and Roger knows this, Roger White, I knocked on doors. I mean, I knocked on thousands of doors over the years. And I think that's a key piece to getting folks elected, because in the last go around with the, COVID and that, a lot of that didn't occur. But I think in-person discussions, maybe forums or conversations in the community on issues are critical.
When I hear that question, I kind of go back to myself. I'm a blue collar worker. I'm an individual who's been a union member pretty much the entire part of my life. But I do remember going to a conference up in Black Lake, Michigan. And up there was a lot of us up there. I was a member of the Civil Human Rights Committee for UAW, and people from all around the country came. And I remember leadership telling us, there's not a single person out here that wouldn't make a good city council person, a good legislator. So for me, it's about getting involved. It's about finding those individuals who you don't have to have a lot of passion. You just have to have that desire to want to make a difference in the community you live in. So for me, it's about getting involved. It's about stepping out of that comfort zone, because we all live in it, stepping out of it and trying to make a difference. Because I can tell you, what I've seen down here in Des Moines is something that it just doesn't make any sense. From a human standpoint, it just doesn't make any sense what's going on. And I attribute it to that power thing. People get power and they don't know how to use it, they abuse it.
I don't have a lot to add. Those are really good answers. I appreciate both of them. It's about getting folks in office that, that share your values. And so it's a lot of this work is going to be on the campaign side of things. We got to do all we can for the candidates that they're in tough districts that we need to keep. Not here. I'm one of these. And get new folks. We got to turn some of these districts over We've got some of that locally here. So without getting too overly partisan at a League of Women Voters event, I don't want to do that. You can fill in the gaps in what I'm trying to say. And then I love what Drone said. You know, we need a bench of young, talented, not necessarily young, but talented people. I gravitate towards the young because I worked at UNI and I like giving young people opportunities and encouraging them to get engaged and involved in the community early on. But we need all kinds of folks doing, you know, public boards and commissions and nonprofit boards and running for local office, whether it's school board or city council or county supervisor or whatever. We need people engaged so that they develop the talent and are then in the position to move to the next level when we need them. So those are great answers. I appreciate it. Yep. Good job.
Thank you. Do we have another question?
I'm really glad to see as many that are here tonight. My name is Marcia Butchin, and I am a lifelong member of Waterloo, but I'm also a member of the League of Women Voters. And so I'm all about getting the vote out and registering voters. That's the main thing. But education is also part of what we do. And I get so upset, and late at night, sometimes I can't even sleep because it's the Wild West in Iowa now. And I would just like to know, I haven't called her lately, but I call her frequently, the governor. But I really want to ask, okay, you've got grandkids in private schools. What's to prevent a shooter from going into those schools? I've got grandkids. A lot of us either have kids or grandkids or great grandkids. Do we want them coming into our area with something that they can carry now without having to go to Thompson for a permit? I'm sorry. There's something really, really wrong, not just in the state, but in the country. And I'm sick and tired of hearing every single day that there's a shooting somewhere. It's amazing how many there's been so far. I thought I heard 600 and some already this year. Something, am I right? Right. Something like that. Anyway, I would like to know, is there anything that you as legislators that on the other side even are talking about? Are they just open to, you know, gunsmoke, I guess?
Well, I mean, I think I shared earlier how things are done. We don't get any input on legislation. The only thing we have is a subcommittee process where we can be critical of maybe what they're doing, or on the House floor that, you know, with their super majority, they need 51 votes on the floor and they need 2 votes to get it out of subcommittee. So it's the process is not favorable to the Democratic Party today. And it's hurting, we're seeing it's hurting all islands in general. So thank you.
I understand exactly what you were saying. You know, I worked with Sheriff Thompson as far as when those laws changed, it became open carry. And I remember telling Sheriff Thompson that I don't want to permit until I see people strapped and walking around. Well, we're there. We are there. I still don't have a permit. I still don't own a gun. But I do know that it's going to take legislation. I mean, because last I knew, you can now go hunting with a semi-automatic weapon. Right, AR-15. Yeah. So from a standpoint, and this is also something that my understanding is there are legislators in the chambers that are carrying. So it's just a matter of, for me, once again, you have to have the right people in place. And for me, it's like the party that's in charge right now, they're the reason for this. I make no bones about that. You know, like I said, I don't own a gun. I don't feel the need to own a gun. I remember I had an incident happen just recently. I'm not going to get into that, but I found out I don't even have to have a permit to go buy a gun. You don't even have to have a permit to go buy a gun. So it's just a matter of, there needs to be some stricter things going on. But until individuals who are in charge do something about it, it's gonna be what it is.
I don't really have anything to add. I mean, they've done a good job explaining. I really appreciate the concerns though, Marcia. Yeah, we all feel it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do we have another question? Okay, Susan.
Again. If we're gonna be talking about gun control, where's mental health? That's my question. Mental health has been cut. Mental health keeps getting cut. We're seeing people that are, yes, guns, but people shoot people. If we can't talk about what's going on and why people are losing their minds and going off and shooting people, what are we doing? Where is the legislation on mental health and getting mental health funded again?
Well, I appreciate the question on mental health. I was going to bring it up later, but it's an area that I've worked on for several years in the state. And if you just look at areas that where our weaknesses exist, critical care access. Today, if you're an individual that's in need of critical care access, about the only place you can go to is an emergency room for services, and they lock you in a room. The bed space, in order for us to provide those critical care accesses for somebody with severe mental health issues, we're having to send those people out of state. And it's a cost to the state going forward. So critical care access is an area that we need to focus on. The other one is early intervention. And early intervention deals with, like, if you're in a K-12 classroom and there's a child that's sitting over in the corner or not being, not enjoying, the teacher can ask, are you all right? Well, no, I've got some issues. That's another area that we actually passed a law to create a mental health child's system. But guess what we didn't do? We didn't fund it. So, and if you look at us in comparison to other states, we're actually ranked 51st in the country with regard to services for that critical care access. And then if you look at the numbers of psychologists and psychiatrists that we have, we're ranked at 46 and 47 in the state. So if you're somebody that's dealing with mental health issues and you need to get into either a therapist or get some treatment, who's the largest provider of mental health services here in our state?
Yes.
It's the correction system. And I know Blackhawk County Jail, that's a big expense for them, providing those services. So, and the governor continues to paint it that they're working on improving mental. I got to tell you, we're not. I talked to a provider today about some issues. And one area of that is the reimbursement for the providers of mental health services aren't even keeping up with, the cost and all those things. We can do so much more with mental health, and I'm going to continue to be a strong advocate on that. The other area, suicide. We have seen an uptick in our state of suicides here in the state. And, some of those are young people. We're seeing that, maybe they're bullied in the classroom or those things. So we need to get to work, and I would appreciate your sending an email to the governor or whoever else, or anybody else in this room, to get on we have the financial resources, we can do that. One area, and I'll stop after this. You and I, Iowa State, and our colleges, they graduate people that are skilled to be therapists or even psychologists, psychiatrists. But guess what's happening? They graduate and they leave the state. I've had some proposals that I think would make sense that we say to that student, stay here in Iowa, we'll reimburse your costs. We want you to stay here and work. I think that's a good approach. So I'll be quiet.
For me, the mental health issues that are going on down at the state level, I don't have the opportunity to talk a lot about those, but no one understands that you had this gentleman sitting beside, you have Timmy Brown Powers, and they are using their voices down there to bring these issues up. But once again, we don't have that ability and power to actually implement a lot of the changes that need to happen. But I have been listening to Bob and Timmy both since I've been out. So it's a huge issue for them, and they are speaking up about it.
One thing I'd like to say is that we know this is a problem. We know that we aren't addressing it as a state. There's a long list of many other things also that we're not funding properly, right? It all comes back to our budget, and budget reflects your priorities, right? And so I kind of get sick of going to meetings and people saying, we need this, we need that, we need the other. When folks in leadership they're demonstrating they're not interested in funding anything. So I asked the people who are advocating for these different things if they would consider getting engaged in tax policy discussions, because that's where it's all at. If state continues to have but record surpluses every year, and that is framed as over collection of taxes from taxpayers' taxes. We need to cut taxes to give that back to the hardworking people who made that money. But at the same time, we're underfunding all of these priorities that we have. So really, we're not collecting too many taxes. We're just not spending them on the things that we need to be spending them on, right? So I've encouraged people, like I said, get engaged in tax policy discussions. The state passed a series of income tax cuts. Last year went to a system where there will eventually be a 3.9% flat tax for state income taxes that'll be phased in over a few years. The governor just recently was heard at a meeting somewhere. Conservative governors are not sure exactly what the meeting was. It was a conservative group outside the state who said that she is going to turn Iowa into a zero income tax state. That is a priority first, to abolish the income tax in the state of Iowa. At the same time, we're telling local governments that they can't collect property taxes, to provide the services that local governments need to provide. So where's it going to come from? How are we going to fund these things? It's been demonstrated that, well, you can try to do it with sales taxes. I don't know, if we're going to continue to even provide the services that we are right now and do it with sales tax, we'd have a 30% sales tax or something if we cut all these other taxes, right? So I just want to bring that up. We know what we need to be doing. We just need a tax system that supports the revenue that we need, that produces the revenue that we need. And then we need to set a budget that reflects our priorities and funds these things properly. So please get engaged in the tax policy discussion.
Thank you.
Need to stand here. I listened to the news this weekend, and first of all, I heard one of the parents was the mental health scares. That's supposed to bring in a lot. Yes. Awesome. know what those people. All these things, smell things. That's so frustrating listening. And a part of it is education, is people who voted these people in. They don't really understand what's going on here. Because our news media and eyeballs slant stuff. We have a lot of Republican, I shouldn't say that, but they do support that county, you know. So anyway, what are your ideas and things we can do for that? I mean, and they do invite, I've been involved in PAC meetings for ISCA and different things. We always invite both parties, but yet the parties who support these changes, they never attend.
Yeah.
So it's
Well,
hard to know what they're thinking.
Just to let you, I mean, we shared kind of earlier what we can do. But, you know, we're pretty limited to making any changes that would improve it. It's up to the majority party, you know. I can get up and speak on it. He can, but, you know, it's kind of like the hearing gets shut off and they don't listen. So I just don't, you know, it's very frustrating for us in that building. So but that's pretty much so where we're at.
And thank you for standing up. We do appreciate it. I think so many times people just get so frustrated that they just.
Well, it's a frustrating job too, I gotta tell you. Yeah.
Do we have?
That's my one. Maybe stand up, stretch my legs. I'm Jerry Hagan, and the Black Hawk County or Black Hawk Community Council President. Welcome on the Black Hawk Democrats. Some of the things we can do is everybody in this room knows that we show up. Right after Trump was elected, there was 400 or 500 people showing up at the meetings because of the horror of what Mark just did. So I applaud everybody in this room for showing up. Like not really, all right, I'm really afraid, but not really the right check in his campaign. We have the county. Every meeting, so like for anybody watching on Facebook Live, there's about 26 people, I think, in this room. We have room for 100. Start showing up, don't give up, just keep showing up and keep a good attitude and we're waiting for you.
Thank you, Jerry. Any other questions? Oh, Jean's got one.
My name is Jean Seal, and I'm the person who sends out all the notices for the forums. I want you all to understand, we invite 13 legislators whose districts touch Black Hawk County. The majority of them are Republican. We need Republicans here to hear what these folks are saying. I really learned so much of these forums. It educates me on the issues, and we need to educate the Republicans. They're the people who need to hear it. We're singing to the choir, and I appreciate everything all of you do. Thank you. But if you know any legislators in the surrounding areas that touch Black Hawk County, tell them they need to come. We have a person who lives in Hudson that we really need to have. If you know of any Republican legislators, encourage them to come because we need to educate them also. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Sherry, do you have a question? Okay.
Hello, everybody. I really hope I don't have purple on my lips. I'm a little self-conscious.
You got it all over your shirt.
Yeah. I was thinking the same.
Thank you so much for coming. Again, I'm going to echo. This is the place to be when you have questions. And we have some wonderful legislators. I love them all. I pray for you. I hope that's not considered partisan to pray. But we need to get the electorate involved. Believe me, there are a number of people who did not vote. And one of the interesting things that's happened lately is we've had a couple of people say to us, you know, I got registered to vote and I got excited and then I got nervous because what's on the ballot? Well, I understand it. Well, I know any of the people's names on there. We have a tremendous job to do. It is our privilege. It is our responsibility. It's our duty. I was a little girl whose parents took her to the ballot box to vote. I learned about our great country, our democracy as a child. We have got to wake up the silent, whatever you want to call them out there, who don't vote for all kinds of reasons. And we need to register those folks and not just register, but make sure they know where can you get good, reputable information about the candidates. What is the deal with a bond for Hawkeye? What does that mean? Does a bond, that makes me think about, you know, so people have questions. We need to be able to answer those questions. And we need to be able to point them to good information. Not Republican, not Democrat, good information so they can really look forward to voting because they're ready. I was at UNI in the fall and I said, you know, you don't sign up for a class, skip every class and then go to the final and say, give me the final, I can do it. You know, if you're not ready to take the test, yeah, you're gonna have some anxiety. So we need to do a good job of not only getting people registered, but getting them prepared. And that's one way we're gonna turn some things around. We need to have a balance of all parties. Democracy does not work in a void. Democracy does not work in a locked room with three guys figuring out whatever the bill is or whatever the budget is. And a very smart person once said, show me your budget and I'll tell you your priorities.
Thank you, Sherry. Any other questions?
Yeah, my name is Bill Shane. I'm from Walden, just a concerned citizen. Two things. Thing one, people are satisfied. They just stay home. They don't vote. There's a whole lot of Republicans in there. They're dissatisfied with the current administration and the one before. We need to be able to get a hold of those people, educate them as to how they're being hosted. And maybe stop them from watching Fox News. Maybe we might get somewhere by getting these people out the vote. I guess the other thing is, I heard a pretty big number that the reorganization, what it was going to save. And I guess I'm having a hard time understanding how you could take people in highly specialized groups, put them all together with no rules, and save a whole bunch of money. Guess I don't understand how to do that. But I would think that you guys need to be watching this budget when it comes up again Because there's a lot of people who think you just make a spreadsheet, run with it. It's a lot more complicated than that. I've worked on many reorganizations, technology transfers. I don't know how it works. And it never comes out the way they say it. So, you know, we have to be watching that and making sure we hold them to their promises. So that's it for me.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, we will wrap up early if each of you would give a closing statement. And Representative Amos, we'll start with you.
Well, thank you for this opportunity, League of Women Voters. And, you know, I guess for me, my closing statement is going to be that I will continue doing the things that I am doing. I will continue to use this voice that I have to try and make a difference in the lives of the people that I represent. Good job.
And, oh, you want me to go?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. Well, appreciate everyone coming tonight and really good discussions. But I wanted to share one thing. As Jerome shared, I'm ranking member of public safety, and I got an email yesterday about a bill that they're very urgently wanting to move forward. And I'm just going to share what the highlights of this bill are. House Study Bill 173, and it deals with firearms on private businesses and school property. First bullet, allows guns on school property. The second is prohibits private businesses owners from banning weapons on their premise. And here's the other one, allows guns on Regent University campuses and community college campuses. So that's the bill. And I just got to let you know, the writer of the bill is Representative Winchell. He is the majority leader of the House Republicans. So that's the bill. They're having a subcommittee on it Monday. I got some people appointed to that committee. But I just got to tell you, that's what we're facing today. Can you imagine that a bank or a credit union wouldn't be able to ban somebody from coming into their credit union or bank with a gun? It's in the schools. It's just, it's unbelievable what I'm seeing down there. I just wanted to share. Thanks, everybody, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you all again for being here on a Friday evening. It's great to be with this crowd of folks, and thank you again to those of you that spoke. Really appreciate your leadership in the community and your expertise, and we'll continue to do all we can to try to get folks in Des Moines to listen to you. I just wanted to share one really kind of end on a happy note, if I could. One bill that I've been working on with somebody here in the community for going on a couple of years now. Dusky Steele works with House of Hope, and I'm sure that many of you in the room know Dusky. She became very interested in trying to investigate and figure out if anything can be done state policy wise to address domestic abuse in the state, because so many of the folks that they serve at House of Hope are domestic abuse victims. She has done lots of research on what's happened in other states. We've had lots of meetings, she and I and Representative Brown Powers, who couldn't be here tonight. And then we started working on drafting legislation around a program that actually the Waterloo Police Department has been trying to kind of implement at a local scale here for quite some time, and is trying to sort of perfect. And this would in a way codify some of the practices that they're doing here locally for use across the state. And I was able to get one of my Republican colleagues, to introduce the bill in the Senate, and we held a subcommittee on it on Thursday, right at the end of the week yesterday. So, anyway, I do my best to maintain relationships across the aisle as much as we talk here about the bad things that are going on in our opinion in Des Moines. I still, I know that given the situation we're in right now, if I'm going to get any sort of public policy done at all, it has to be introduced by one of my friends across the aisle. So I maintain good relationships with them. Got, in this case, one of them to introduce this bill, and a subcommittee was held. The chair of the subcommittee, Senator Jeff Taylor, who is a very conservative Republican from Northwest Iowa, liked the bill a lot, said that it did things to address some issues that he's seen in their community as well. So he's going to work with us on trying to advance it to the Senate Judiciary Committee. And we'll see if we can move it forward from there. But that came from our community. I'm very proud of it. Proud of Dusky for doing that work on the bill. And just wanted to report to you all that you can be proud of that as well. So, yeah, thank you. SSB 1151, I think, Roger. I don't have it written down and I don't have the bill in front of me. I think it's SSB 1151. Keywords, if you did a keyword search, would be domestic abuse risk assessment. Anyway, it's an honor to serve our community, consider all of Blackhawk County and now a piece of Tama County and a piece of Benton County to be, my district. We all work together really well as a team in trying to serve you and your best interests. So thank you for giving us that opportunity to do that. Please always continue to reach out if we can ever be helpful with anything, even if it's, it doesn't have to involve state legislation. If it is some sort of constituent service that we can provide to you, connecting you to state government in one way or another, that's another very important role that we play. And we're happy to do that and get a lot of satisfaction out of helping folks. So thank you. Have a great weekend.
So, thank you, everybody. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, it was my privilege to help moderate tonight. I feel like you guys did a great job. And thank you to our speakers. And please take a cupcake home with you.